Hello everyone, it's Miss Shakespeare talking to you from her isolated house, keeping safe. I hope you're keeping safe and keeping well as well. So I've got the Key Stage 4 work here and I need you to find your fiction workbook and have a look at page 2, exercise A, Mr. Norris changes trains. If you just pause the video and go and get your workbook. So the extract comes from chapter 2 and it's written from the perspective, that means the point of view, of narrator William Bradshaw, Christopher Isherwood's 1935 novel. It explores the character of Mr. Norris, a communist living in Germany during the rise of Nazism. William and Mr. Norris meet on a train and become friends. As the story unfolds, William discovers unusual things about his new friend. In this extract, William has just arrived at Mr. Norris's flat. And what I want you to think about as we read the passage is how the writer creates a bit of suspense and tension for the reader. See if you can feel some tension in the way that he writes. A moment later, Mr. Norris himself came into the room, nervously rubbing his manicured hands together. "My dear boy, this is indeed an honour. Delighted to welcome you under the shadow of my humble roof tree." He didn't look well, I thought. His face wasn't so rosy today, and there were rings under his eyes. He sat down for a moment in an armchair, but rose again immediately, as if he were not in the mood for sitting still. He must have been wearing a different wig, for the joins in this one showed as plain as murder. "You'd like to see over the flat, I expect?" he asked, nervously touching his temples with the tips of his fingers. "I should very much," I smiled, puzzled because Mr. Norris was obviously in a great hurry about something. With fussy haste is another word for hurry, he took me by the elbow, steering me towards the door in the opposite wall from which he himself had just emerged. Emerged means to come out from. "We'll go this way first, yes." But hardly had we taken a couple of steps when there was a sudden outburst of voices from the entrance hall. "You can't, it's impossible," came the voice of the young man who had ushered me into the flat, and a strange, loud, angry voice answered, "That's a dirty lie, I tell you he's here." Mr. Norris stopped as suddenly as if he'd been shot. "Oh dear," he whispered, hardly audible. "Oh dear." Stricken with indecision, that means unable to make a decision, and alarm, he stood still in the middle of the room, as though desperately considering which way to turn. His grip on my arm tightened, either for support or merely to implore me to keep quiet. To implore someone means to beg someone desperately. "Mr. Norris will not be back until late evening." The young man's voice was no longer apologetic but firm. "It's no good your waiting." He seemed to have shifted his position and to be just outside, perhaps barring the way into the sitting room. And the next moment, the sitting room door was quietly shut with a click of a key being turned. We were locked in. "He's in there!" shouted the strange voice, loud and menacing. There was a scuffling, followed by a heavy thud, as if the young man had been flung violently against the door. The thud roused Mr. Norris to action. With a single, surprisingly agile movement, agile means able to move quickly and easily, he dragged me after him into the adjoining room. Adjoining means the next room. We stood there together in the doorway, ready, at any moment, for further retreat. I could hear him panting heavily at my side. Meanwhile, the stranger was rattling the sitting-room door as if he meant to burst it open. "You damned swindler!" he shouted in a terrible voice. "You wait till I get my hands on you." A swindler means somebody who cheats somebody out of money. It was all so very extraordinary that I quite forgot to feel frightened, although it might well be supposed that the person on the other side of the door was either raving drunk or insane. I cast a questioning glance at Mr. Norris, who whispered reassuringly, He'll go away in a minute, I think. The curious thing was that, although scared, he didn't seem at all surprised by what was taking place. It might have been imagined from his tone that he was referring to an unpleasant but frequently recurring natural phenomenon, a violent thunderstorm, for instance. His blue eyes were warily, uneasily alert. His hands rested on the door handle, prepared to slam it shut at an instant's notice. Did you notice which paragraph had the most suspense and tension? If you look back at line 23, we're going to look very briefly at how the writer creates a bit of suspense. I'm just going to read line 23 to 25 again. He seemed to have shifted his position and to be just outside, perhaps barring the way into the sitting room. It's this line. Look at all the commas. And the next moment, the sitting room door was quietly shut, with a click of a key being turned. We were locked in. Brilliant use of punctuation there by the writer to create tension. A really long, complex sentence separated by commas to keep you going. You're almost losing breath as you're reading it, and then a short, sharp sentence